heal as a team, we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen, believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's a team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Yes, they are, ladies and gentlemen. Freedom, fairness, and justice are more than ideas. They're perspectives, and I suggest everyone start to live by them. Welcome to the Sunday edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It's October 30th, 2011, one day before All Hallows Eve. And I'd like to welcome to the show my good friend Susan Lindauer, who, as you guys know, comes on about once or twice a month, and she gives me updates on Libya. She's told you guys about Iraq. She's told you guys about many things, but I like to get Susan's input as things move forward, because Libya and even Iraq still to this day are very fluid situations. And I'm currently reading Susan's book, Extreme Prejudice, and it reads like a spy novel. I'm about a third of the way through, and it's, I mean, when they came to, you know, I felt anxious for you when I was reading it, and you described how they came to your door, you know, the FBI came and got you, you know, and, you know, as an quote-unquote Iraqi agent and all this. So I suggest you guys read Susan's book, because it's like reading a spy novel, but it's, you know, real. And you'll...
Yeah, people think it's going to be an academic book. It's not academic at all. It's not a scholarly tome like this boring, yicky stuff. I don't live like that. I don't write like that.
Well, that's what makes the book interesting, and it helps flow, Susan. I mean, part of the people get to understand you as a human being more than just what the lamestream media and, you know, Wikipedia, which I would not use as a source. I've had skeptics try to tell me on many different occasions about different things. Well, it's just in Wikipedia, right? And I could sign into Wikipedia and change things, so that doesn't, you know, that's not really a good source. Anybody could go in there and put whatever they want.
Absolutely. One time in 1 year, Wikipedia gave me 3 different birthdays. And I was like, and literally to correct it, I had to have my attorney contact Wikipedia, and they demanded to see my birth certificate before they would finally fix it. They were like, if you can't give us a birth certificate then, and we're like, whoa, wait a minute. We are, this is the attorney for Susan Lindauer, and you got all these other people who are making up stories about her. She's the real thing. And they're like, well, how do we know you're telling the truth? They're like, oh my God, we had to send a birth certificate. I'm not making that up. Crazy.
Well, see, there you go, because people can go in and they switch things around and they change it. And I find it very, I'm using air quotes, coincidental, because I don't believe in coincidence, that people like you, Judith Vary Baker, who was Lee Harvey Oswald's mistress, and she was working on a weaponized form of cancer in the 60s to take out Castro. Anybody, even William Cooper, Jim Mars, stuff like that, David Icke, you start to look these people up in Wikipedia, and a lot of you all have negative stuff in there. It's always, they're a nutbag, or they're crazy, or, this or that. It's always the same negative tone. But that's just coincidence, right? I'm just supposed to believe that's all coincidental.
Yes, it's like somebody sent me a blog, Digital Journal sent me my Wikipedia file, and they said, we want you to explain this before you publish on on our blog. And I referred them to an affidavit by my attorney saying that my story was correct, and they had 28,000 wiretaps and 8,000 emails and, blah, 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 all this documentation to prove my story was true. But it literally took an attorney affidavit before they would let me publish on their blog, because they're so, the defamation is so over the top. But I take it as a compliment, and I'll tell you something. For all of you out there who are so vicious towards me on Wikipedia, if there's anybody listening, I intend, my attorney and I had a good chuckle about this, and we agree. We're leaving Wikipedia as it is because it stands as evidence of the viciousness and the malice of the deceptions by the GOP in the war on terrorism. And Wikipedia proves my story when I say that the GOP exerted extreme violence and brutality towards the system of democracy in this country. And all I have to do is say, look up Wikipedia, and you'll see it. Because people are now trying to say that I was never really held in prison on a Texas military base. I was never really indicted on the Patriot Act. That's just disinformation. So as people realize that I'm not the crazy woman that they've tried to say, that I'm not this religious maniac. Everybody tried to say I was a religious maniac. They actually did that.
Well,
and now they can't pull that anymore.
And
so now they're trying to say...
They use the psychic thing against you too, because you admitted that you have the ability to you have. I
have an interest in psychic phenomena.
Yes.
Yeah, sure I do.
So, but
okay.
What does that make you a nut? I don't think so. Look, I went to a real haunted estate on this past Friday and hung out until about 5 o'clock in the morning. We were originally going to leave at 4, and we ended up hanging out till probably actually about 5:30, and then we left. And we hung out.
Where was it?
Down in South Florida. It's called the Deering Estate. It's the most haunted place in South Florida, and it really is haunted. It dates back to, there were people Indians that date back to 10,000 years ago that lived on the land. So a lot of it, there's an Indian burial ground on the land and everything else. So yeah, it really is haunted. I saw some interesting stuff, but the point is, does that make me crazy? Because I went and checked that out, you know what I mean? So just because you have, the interest. I am
a progressive thinker. I am open-minded to all kinds of ideas.
But so because you're open-minded,
that's how I am. That's what makes me who I am.
Because you're open-minded. I guess that's what makes you the bad person. The quote-unquote enemy, because you think outside the box. Which makes you actually
definitely
dangerous. It makes you a dangerous enemy to them. You might not think you're dangerous to them, but you are, because they. You present, and you could give facts and information to other people, and the way you come across is very important. You don't come across like some scholarly douchebag. You're very personable. You have this.
Thank you.
You're very charming, and you're You're giddy, you're fun. You know what I mean? You can have a conversation with you and it flows. So people that listen to you are more apt to believe what you have to say because you're not coming across like some idiot, and you don't talk down to people. You know, it's like you talk to people, and that makes you dangerous.
Thank you.
That makes you dangerous.
I take that as a compliment.
You should take it as a compliment. I would consider it a Medal of Honor because that means that you're doing something. So, I mean, obviously you're...
Well, you know what? It's true. Well, the thing is, when I give talks and stuff, I speak from my heart and I just tell the truth because I lived it, so I know what it is.
Well, and that's why people love you, Susan. All right, stay right there. We're going to break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a few minutes. Stay tuned. More with my friend, Susan Lindauer. We'll be right back.
We tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
People are always asking me, yo, Gemini, what's your angle? Are you a devil or an angel? And I say both, as I continue to blame the Knights Templar and the Hospitallers, the real reason New York lost their tower.
Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And to answer, before I get back into everything with Susan, to answer the question in the chat room, or not really a question, somebody made more of a statement about how when they try to get on when I put articles out on Twitter, that happened, and they said it was blocked, they couldn't get to it, said server not found. That happens a lot with my website. Most noticeably with the page that I made with the help of Miss Susan Lindauer about the NATO war crimes going on in Libya. And whenever I tweet it or put it on Facebook, I always get at least one message on both that they can't get to it, and my website's down. And I say, no, the website's not down. You're being blocked. One guy even sent me a message, and he said, I know that you're being blocked because it kept telling me that the server was down, so I went through a proxy server, and I was able to get through to you. So that means for anybody that knows anything about hacking, he was able to get around whatever filter they had up, but that page gets blocked in a lot of countries. So that went viral. It's literally on over 2,000 different sites of the link.
Yay! We're beating them. We're beating them.
Been translated into Russian. I've seen it in Chinese. It's incredible. It's being translated into other languages, and the pictures and videos that we have up, the link to the site that we made specifically for Obama's Libya.com, it's gone viral. And the truth is out there. And I've told people, rip copies of the video. Go get Real Player. Go to that page. You can rip a copy of every video so you have it. So if they eventually try to take it down or it's blocked, you can upload it. See, the whole point is to flood the internet with it, because once it's like everybody knows, once it's on the internet, it's on the internet. Because they can't get everything. It's impossible. Right. They would spend years hunting every little thing down. So if 10 people uploaded it, and then 10 people per person per each upload, from that upload copied it and uploaded it, and then another 10 people, it would just grow exponentially. There'd be so many copies they can't stop it. So the truth needs to get out there. There's ethnic cleansing going on. Look what they did to Gaddafi. Look what they did to him. And I'm not saying he was perfect, but he brought the highest living standards in Africa to Libya. And now, first of all,
highest literacy standard in the world.
Not
89%.
Not anymore. They're going to be like the Iraqi people now after the 10 years of sanctions. Reading Susan's book, a lot of things clicks together, and stuff that I had thought about before, but I just never I never really thought about it. And when you were talking about the sanctions in your book and how that in one generation completely, destroyed the literacy rate in Iraq completely. Yeah. And I remember, everybody say, you hear soldiers say, anybody that's ever deployed, Marines, sailors, airmen, anybody that's ever been over to the Middle East and been in Iraq, man, those Iraqi people, they're dumb. They can't They can't, they can't drive, which a lot of them can't. A lot of them, they have no common sense or anything, and you can see it. And at first you say, man, I wonder what it is. Are they really just barbarians and savages? Are they really that dumb? When you realize it was the sanctions. Because a lot of the doctors...
sanctions did it, yes.
Yeah, and a lot of the doctors and lawyers and all those people, they were the first people to get shot and killed during the war, during the opening salvos of the war.
That's right. It
wasn't by Saddam Hussein that did that stuff. So,
Iraq, before the sanctions started, Iraq performed the second heart transplant in the world. It had the finest healthcare system, hospital care system in the entire Middle East. It rivaled London and Washington and New York. London and New York for healthcare, and the sanctions obliterated the whole healthcare system. It's horrible. And education has been wiped out. Electricity has been wiped out. The joke is on us, though, because also the oil production facilities, the pipelines, the pumping stations have become so worn out and so degraded that we, the West, cannot get to the oil that Iraq has. And so we have taken the second largest oil producing country in the world, and we've rendered it incapable of producing what we need. So the whole thing was it's a catastrophic failure that we don't even really understand yet, because we cannot afford to rebuild it. We, the West, do not have the resources to rebuild the oil production facilities in that country. So stupid.
Well, the oil industry will tell you it doesn't make sense to have that kind of turmoil, because they need stability in order to be able to, pump oil on a constant basis and everything else. And you guys really need to get Susan's book. Again, Extreme Prejudice.
It's Extreme Prejudice.
You got to go to Amazon and get it. You got to get the book. And I'm not saying, I'm not, doing it as a plug for her because she asked me to do it. I'm telling you because I'm reading the book. And again, I always tell my listeners to get certain books. Get Susan's book, Extreme Prejudice, so you can understand what was going on inside Iraq before we invaded. So you can understand a little bit from an insider's point of view a little better that Iraq wanted to work with us. It wasn't Saddam Hussein thumbing his nose at America and giving us the finger and trying to be a tough guy. 10 years of sanctions had destroyed that country. Plus, we were still constantly bombing it every once in a while. And the only things we blew up are like powdered milk factories and anything inside the infrastructure that would be needed, to sustain that country and their sovereignty. They brought Iraq to its knees. And then when Saddam was ready to, play ball, there were people like Susan and other people that were either CIA agents or other assets, or people that worked inside a government that really did want things to work and tried to get things to work. And Susan's team in particular was top notch, and they were getting things going really well. And then
we had a comprehensive peace framework on the table. And for all of you who are, going into 2012, you need to know, all the listeners out there need to know about the comprehensive peace framework and the choices that were made before the war. And you need to understand, like, for example, Iraq offered to buy 1 million American manufactured automobiles every year for 10 years. And think about the jobs that would have been created in Michigan and Ohio and Indiana, where there are now record foreclosures, record poverty levels. There's no hope for the future. They're in real trouble over there. And so you when you go to evaluate these politicians and you're trying to decide who you vote for, who brought you jobs? Who took them away? The other thing is the anti-terrorism. The Iraqis offered to invite the FBI to send a task force into Baghdad with authorization to conduct terrorism investigations and make arrests. And they also tried to turn over the financial records, banking records, that would show where early Al-Qaeda figures were holding their money. And this would have been the greatest the greatest windfall for anti-terrorism. It would have allowed us to shut down the pipeline that's feeding terrorism around the world. And the Republicans refused to take it because they didn't want to give Saddam any credit for what? For contributing to the war on terrorism. So we lost all of that. And Saddam said that that he would destroy the papers if the United States tried to declare war on Iraq. So when the bombing started in Baghdad, all that stuff went up in flames. It's gone now. We've lost it forever. But there's just, the fraud of the war on terrorism. You guys need to know what that is. You are no offense, this is a very educated public you guys have, but you are in the dark on this. The war on terrorism has been a major fraud, and it's bankrupting our country.
I agree 110%, Susan. We're going to get cut off by the break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen.
Silence is the enemy. Words have power, but actions speak louder. Pretend to be free till you die a slave. A soldier in the desert searching for a ghost in the cave. For the corporation, I run out of patience. Sick of seeing troops sink to die for your lives. Spending dollars in debt. We holler in protest till we have your arrest. We will not rest. And we know what you did that day. Kill your own citizens to advance your ways. All my real patriots stand up and say
9/11 was completely an inside job. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. During the break, Susan and I came up with a perfect way to solve the national debt problem. When Bush and Cheney and Wolfowitz and all them get rounded up for treason and arrested finally, and I keep saying when because if you have to visualize things to make it actually happen. So I just keep thinking in the positive. That way, eventually, it will happen. Or either that, or Dick Cheney's little battery-operated pump will turn off. But and I usually don't wish ill on anybody, but that man is evil. And we figured out that when they get rounded up, if you televise, because obviously they'll be found for treason, and then the punishment for what they did will obviously be the death penalty. So, which is according to laws that are already on the books. So, when they get executed, we should televise it, make it pay-per-view, and charge $5 a head. Just $5 per link, and then anybody can watch it for any period of time, whatever. I don't care if you stream it all over the world, But whatever proceeds get made, take the proceeds and put it towards the national debt. And I guarantee you, you'd wipe out the national debt and probably make a couple million.
Yeah, take that, Warren Buffett. This is a better plan than his idea.
Right? It took us like 3 minutes and over a cup of coffee during the break to figure it out. And look, there's a lot of people that are around the world that cannot stand Dick Cheney, and they know he's a war criminal, and they're just waiting for that.
He is a war criminal. He is a war criminal. And the thing is, if you read my book, Extreme Prejudice, The Terrifying Story of the Patriot Act and the Cover-Ups of 9/11 in Iraq, you will get everybody knows that they lied. But the problem is you really don't know how badly they lied and the depth of their lies. You only know that they lied about the weapons of mass destruction. But there's a huge range of issues behind that related to 9/11, related to the peace option, and related to the malicious actions of the cover-up, which is my story because I was the asset covering the Iraqi embassy, and so I and all the other assets were thrown in prison, and you don't even know that. It wasn't just me. There were just a handful of us, mind you, but every single one of us got thrown in prison, and my co-defendants were required to sign confessions that they had deliberately created false intelligence for the CIA and the FBI so that they could try to push the United States into war with Iraq. And this was craziness. These were the sons of diplomats. And they talked about how in the prison telephone conversations, which I have the transcripts of this, because every phone call, as you know, you guys are sophisticated, you know that prison phone calls are recorded and transcribed. And so in their phone calls to their family, they talk about how the CIA and the FBI are trying to force them into these confessions, and how they had arrested their family members, their brothers and sisters, and thrown all the kids in prison while the mother and the father were they were Iraqi diplomats, and they had left New York and gone to Tunisia because, you know, once the war broke out, they were forced to leave the country. But the children stayed behind. And so all of the kids get thrown in prison. And it's a horrifying story of the abuses that we would usually associate with Saddam Hussein. But you don't even know the kind of deception that was applied. And if you did, I think you would you'd be outraged. I just think that most Americans, if you understood what they did to me, an American citizen, on the Patriot Act, I was the second non-Arab American ever to be indicted on the Patriot Act. And I got hit with secret charges, secret evidence, secret grand jury testimony. I was not allowed to know what I was accused of doing. The government was required to provide no evidence that I actually did it. My attorney was not allowed to see the grand jury statements of who were my accusers. Then they throw me in prison on a military base. I'm not allowed to have a trial or a hearing. Not even a hearing, you guys. You just don't even know how bad this law really is, and especially given the conflict that is coming. I think we're in the beginning stages of a major positive, I hope, revolution where we're going to take back this country. But you need to know what weapons they have at their disposal, because they're going to hit you with this stuff.
Well,
I was the first one. I'm not going to be the last.
Did you hear what? That's okay, Susan. Did you get passionate, woman? Get angry. Susan, this woman, hear her roar. Did you hear? No, I don't remember if it was Panetta. I don't think it was Panetta. It was one of the attorneys. What's his name? Alberto Gonzalez.
Holder?
No, Gonzalez. I don't remember where he was, but it came out in the news yesterday. And he was giving a speech or something, or having a talk somewhere, and he said that, or somebody asked him a question, whatever it was. He said the next thing is going to be, I think it was Gonzalez anyway. The next terror attack is going to involve a terrorist from inside the United States. So they're already telling you, yeah, the next attack is going to be a homegrown guy. So not only are they trying to, implant that idea in your head, now you have government officials coming out and saying things like, yeah, they are going to do this. This is what's going to happen.
Well, I'll tell you what they are going to do, what will happen. It is inevitable, and this is not a conspiracy theory. This is an inevitability that at some point there will be a nuclear attack on the United States. And it's just, we've already mapped it out. It's like one of those things that you forecast and you plan for. And we expect, and we've talked about this for 10 years. Okay, so first of all, this is not a warning that has originated in the past 2 or 3 months. This is a warning that's been going on since the mid-'90s, that we forecast that eventually there would be a dirty bomb, nuclear bomb attack on the financial district of New York City. And most likely it would occur, we've even figured out, most likely it would occur on a Friday afternoon, because that's an Islamic holiday, and it will happen at approximately 3 o'clock when the stock market's closed. And the stock market bell will go off, and a bomb will go off right at the same time. And that's how detailed they've mapped it out. But they've also done some other things because of that. Like they've got backup files of the Wall Street records, like Wall Street stock purchases and stuff like that. So when it happens, they're going to be protected. However, the real scary thing is that we know that it can't be stopped. Do you know what I mean? All of our policies are driving this conclusion. So, in other words, we know we've known this for like 10 years, that all U.S. policies are driving us to the point where it is inevitable that somebody will do this to us, because they will be responding to all the violence of what we're doing to them.
Well, we've created so many monsters.
What I mean? We have created this, and
exactly.
So as we are creating this situation, we the government, and so the CIA has said, look, there's a consequence to U.S. foreign policy, and the consequence is going to be a nuclear attack, a dirty bomb attack on New York City, and we know this. And all of the things that we're doing are driving this forward. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh,
so when it happens, I don't want to hear anybody say, "Why did they do it to us?" Because why did they do it to us? We're doing it.
You see how they jump on Ron Paul when he says, "Well, they had, on 9/11 we were attacked because of our foreign policy," and people don't like to hear that, because that makes us have to reflect on ourselves and actually maybe take some responsibility for the things that we've done, and nobody wants to hear that. And you get the far right all up in arms, blah, 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 blah. And then you get the hardcore lefties doing the same thing, because they don't want Ron Paul in either, because they all have the same goal eventually. They're all controlled by the same people. So all the mouthpieces are doing the same thing, and they're all bashing Ron. I'm not trying to say Ron Paul is perfect, but they attack him because he speaks the truth.
He's got good ideas.
He's the only one that speaks the truth. I mean, look, he's accurate when he says it is only a matter of time before we get hit again because of what the CIA calls blowback. So if something he's not...
And the CIA knows it too. The CIA knows it too.
They say it all the time. And here's the thing. With all the security we have in place now, if something happens, you can bet your bippy without a shadow of a doubt that this rogue element, this shadow government, will be at the helm, and they will have their fingers in it, and you will have all these rogue elements of intelligence agencies around the world with their hands involved in it, and it'll all be for the purpose of the ever-encroaching police state, because that's what it's for. It's like... Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I have some breaking news. If you guys go over to, I'll have a link to it posted. I'll have the article and stuff up at Federal Jack soon. But if you go over to Deadline Live, which is Jack Bled's website, he has it up right now. Apparently, there was a attempt on Judith Vary Baker's life while she was in Canada. And you all know who Judith is. She's been a guest on my show before, and she's a friend of mine. I did email her when I found out about this before the show, but I wanted to, I had forgotten to mention it. Now, before I forget to mention again, I want to get it out there. So, yeah, there was another attempt on Judith's life. She is alive still, but... what did
they do? What did they try to do?
I don't know if they tried poisoning her or not. I'm not really sure. I didn't get a chance to go and read the. I found that literally I got a chance to read the article about 2 minutes before I called you and we came on air. But all I know is that there was an attempt on her life. So I'm not really sure of the details. But if you go to deadlinelive.info, which is Jack Blood's website, he'll have it there, and I'll have it posted up on Federal Jack. But I will be getting more information on it, because I did email. I put an email together really quick and sent it out to Judith before I got on air. But before I forgot to talk about it, I wanted to touch on that. And that segues into another subject. Susan and I did a special. The last time she was on, I called her back a little bit later, and I had to do a little special addendum, and I threw it up on YouTube and everything. And I did play it on my following Wednesday show. I played the clip, but I wanted to bring it up while she was on air again. She gets death threats. So if Susan ever is found suicided, she said that she will not commit suicide.
I would never commit suicide. Let me just tell you, everybody. I realize that the government has tried to say that I was a religious maniac, which is really a joke. I am not a religious maniac. I categorically deny it. However, I do have a faith in God, and I happen to believe that this world is beautiful and wonderful and spectacular, even though it's also painful and, bad things happen to us, and it's a great adventure. And even in my worst times, even when I was under indictment for 5 years, I never considered suicide because I just believe too much that this world is beautiful and worth fighting for, and I'm going to be here until my last breath. And so anybody who, if anybody ever tries to tell you I'm suicidal myself, that is so completely garbage. It could not ever happen.
Yeah, that means that
it would never be possible.
They killed you and did it to you, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
so if
absolutely.
If you're ever found to have had a mysterious car accident, or if you're ever found to have,
I drove off a cliff.
Yeah, killed yourself in some fashion, one way, shape, or another. You didn't do it. So if they ever say,
That's
something,
right.
and I hope nothing happens. I hope you live to be a very old lady, Susan. I hope you live to be like 150. But if something ever does happen, I want to make sure that people did hear you say that you will never commit suicide. That way they can't try to silence you.
It would be impossible. It would be impossible for me because I just think the world is too beautiful. And it's so, I just think that it's just that this adventure that we're having right now, I think that we're on the verge of, it's going to be painful. I have no doubt. This is going to be difficult. But I think that our country, especially with the Occupy Wall Street movement, I'm so excited about this. I feel like we're awake, and even people who have been asleep for a long time, who I had counted out, who I thought, they're never going to participate. They're never going to get involved in this. They're now awake. And it's like this is just, it's like there's like an alarm clock that's going off around the country right now. And it's a great moment. And I think the next 12 months are going to be so exciting.
I think that to answer the question earlier about just you asked how they tried to kill her, and this is important because you have to watch for this kind of stuff yourself now, Susan, because I know you do have a life. You're not a hermit. They tried putting glass in Judith's food, apparently, like ground up pieces of glass in her food. I guess she was at a dinner or something. So please, I'm not trying to freak you out, but please, I consider you a friend, so please be careful when you go out to eat. Inspect your food thoroughly.
They put glass in her food.
Mm-hmm.
That is horrifying. That would absolutely cut up your whole intestines and your. Oh my God.
Yeah. So please be careful. See how evil these people are.
I'll tell you something. Right before on the question of attempted assassinations, right before, several months before the testimony on. Okay, let me back up. In 5 years of indictment, I was only allowed one morning of pretrial evidentiary testimony. They refused to give me a trial. And under the guise of a competency hearing, I was allowed to call two professional contacts, acquaintances, to vouch for who I was. And the first one was a former congressional chief of staff. And she confirmed that she knew that I was an intelligence asset. She knew my intelligence handler, Paul Hoven, for 20 years, and she could vouch that he was doing intelligence work, and she vouched for the fact that we had a very intensive relationship and that he talked about me all the time. Okay. And then the other witness was critical. It was Park Godfrey, an associate professor at York University in Toronto, and he is very credible, scientific, methodical, speaks very slowly and precisely like a scientist, okay. And he verified my 9/11 warnings. And there would be no question if you heard his testimony that he was you could trust what he was saying, because he's not an activist. He has nothing to gain from. He's not a 9/11 truther. He's not passionate and outspoken like I am. He's a scientist, and he was recalling very precise conversations that we had in the months before 9/11. Okay. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is, once the government agreed to the court agreed to the hearing, the government tried to stop the hearing from taking place, and they did it several months before the hearing. I had my car was broken down, and I had to take it to a mechanic in my neighborhood, and he said, "Oh my God!" He called me up. He said, "Susan," he knew about my case, and he said, "Susan, somebody has cut the struts of your car. Now, the strut is the block under the engine, the sheath under the engine that holds the engine block up so that it doesn't drop out of your car when you're driving. And he said that somebody had gotten under my car, and had hacked out the struts so that the strut was about to collapse. And he said, that the only way that I could have done this would be is if I had gone on the back roads of West Virginia and gone off-road, all-terrain vehicle riding. You see what I mean? I'd have to go off-road and go up and down hills and drag out the car engine.
Yeah, they probably climbed up onto your car with a little portable electric powered, probably battery powered grinder, and just started grinding away. That way, if you hit bumps and stuff, or maybe when you take a certain turn, because the struts would collapse, and then what would happen was the whole front end of the car would drop down. You'd lose control. You wouldn't have any steering, and if you're going around a curve, you'd fly off the curve, and if there's a tree, you'd be done. And that's exactly.
And what they said is that exactly. And even if I kept going, the fact is that the car would, I would drop, the car engine, the seat would drop down onto the ground, and the car would keep coming forward, and I'd be dead. They said this is a guaranteed fatal accident that you'll have if you. So the mechanic was like, I know your situation, and I know what they did, and I know what these people, are capable of doing to you, and I think someone's trying to kill you, Susan. And this was after I'd been under indictment for 4 years. I'd been under indictment for 4 years at this point, but my hearing was like 3 months away, and so they tried. And then after my hearing, about 6 weeks after my hearing, I had a very old car, okay, and my car broke down again. It had 100,000 miles on it, so that's not suspicious. But it happened to break down, far away from my house. So this time I went to a different mechanic. And the different mechanic, who knew nothing about my past, says to me, "Oh, my God, are you going through a bad divorce?" He said, I need to talk to you. We need to have a conversation as quickly as possible. You need to come over to my office because I got to tell you something. He said, "Are you going through a bad divorce?" And I said, "Well, yeah, you could kind of say that." I'm kind of thinking about the CIA in my case. Oh, yeah, kind of. He said, "Well, your ex-husband is trying to kill you." He said that they had cut through the axle of my car. And he said, "This is a neat, clean saw cut. That somebody has actually cut through about 2/3 of the axle of your car, and if you hit a bump or something, it's going to go off, and your axle's going to break off, and your car and your axle are going to go separate ways." And this is about 6 weeks after my 9/11 testimony by Park Godfrey.
You pissed somebody off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, they were determined to stop the story.
You made somebody angry, Susan.
What a surprise.
We're going to get cut off by the top of the hour break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for hour number 2 with Susan Lindauer. We're going to get into Libya and more when we come back. Gaddafi wasn't perfect, but he wasn't as bad as everybody tries to make him out to be. So.
Oh, you're nothing like these guys.
Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for hour number 2, the Sunday edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is October 30th, 2011, one day before Halloween. I'm hanging out with my good friend, former CIA asset, anti-war activist, author, and all-around awesome human being, Susan Lindauer.
Author of Extreme Prejudice.
Yes, check out Susan's book. Seriously, you guys need to read her book because it's not a boring read at all. You get sucked into it. It's her perspective on exactly what happened to her, and she, at least, even if you don't like her, there's always a skeptic out there. Go out and get the book. Don't just run your mouth based on what you read in Wikipedia. At least if you're gonna run your mouth about somebody, like be educated about it. Otherwise, you're not a true skeptic. You're just being.
Wikipedia is total disinformation, total make believe. They actually have fabricated non-existent court documents that they pretend are related to things tied to my case. And we've sent Wikipedia the actual documents, and they have taken them off the internet. And so it's just craziness. My attorney actually got involved, and Wikipedia is a front for disinformation.
Exactly.
And we're allowing it to stand at this point because we want the record to show how badly this faction of the GOP leadership actually behaved. And you can't believe how incredibly dishonest they are until you see my book, and how it proves malicious deception. It wasn't just that they failed to connect the dots.
Oh no, you can see that. You can see that there was. It's like I said to you off air. Not everybody that works for the CIA is a bad person, and not everybody that works in the intelligence community is a bad person. There are good people that are really working, trying to do things, and they knew that, that when they had warnings that something was going to happen, they ignored it, which means that they obviously already knew about it. And the reasons, when you look into it, you can see that they knew about it because there was rogue elements within the CIA connected with Mossad and other intelligence agencies like Jordanian intelligence, Saudi intelligence, and all these others. So obviously the rabbit hole of 9/11 is massive and deep, and it couldn't be summed up even in a 4-hour
bigger
episode.
than you realize.
Oh, it's so
bigger
ridiculous.
than you realize.
It's so ridiculous.
It's like,
there's so many fingers involved in it, Susan. Obviously, it's an inside job. Obviously, it's not just 19 douches from Afghanistan in a cave. Let's look at the official conspiracy theory for a minute. 19 ass backwards Arabs. That's what they would have you believe, that all Arabs are ass backwards, right? So 19 ass backward Arabs from a cave. Okay, they're so dumb and backwards. They live in a cave, right? Yeah, but these guys yet have access to satellite phones and all this other stuff. So they have Bin Laden he's a quote unquote dumb Arab, but yet he's got the Bat Cave, right? Okay, so you see right there, it's a contradiction, but it goes further. Now, working from his Bat Cave with his laptop and his wireless, he orchestrated, with surgical precision these strikes all over the United States, in New York and in Washington, without a problem, without a hit, except for Flight 93, of course.
And meanwhile he's in a when 9/11 is actually going down, he's in a hospital bed. In where is it? God, where was it? Pakistan? Was it Pakistan or Saudi Arabia? I apologize to everybody. I always get this. I've been told this before, and I keep forgetting.
Well, where they caught him this past time, he was in. When they say they killed him, it was in Pakistan.
No, okay, but when on 9/11 he was in the hospital.
Oh,
he did all of this while he was he planned it from the cave, and then he executed it from a.
I thought it was I thought it was Qatar myself, but I have to. It might be Saudi.
Okay. Sorry.
It wasn't Pakistan.
He was in a hospital bed and he was having a meeting with the CIA.
I can't exactly. It was an American-run hospital. It might have even been Dubai. In fact, you know what? I think now that we've named like four different areas, I think it was. I honestly think, if I remember correctly, I think it was in Dubai. But
isn't that terrible? It's like I did the same thing.
Oh no, my friend John, my friend John, who listens to the show, and he happens to be an expert on this. He said he was in Dubai months before. It was in Pakistan, in Rawalpindi Hospital. So he was in Pakistan.
There you go.
Correct.
There you go.
So he planned it from Pakistan in a hospital bed using his wireless laptop. And
when he's about to die, and then magically he lives 10 years.
And then to have a John Woo style shootout with the Navy SEALs, where he's jumping over his dialysis machine sideways, double fisting pistols, and it's all slicked out like the Matrix. You can see the bullets whizzing by his turban, right? I mean,
there you go.
This is just so ridiculous. I mean, these guys, these CIA writers over at Langley. And by the way, people, don't be fooled. Half of the TV scripts, this has been admitted by multiple people inside of Hollywood. half of the TV scripts and more than half of the TV scripts and movie scripts that go out there and become movies or TV shows are written with someone from the CIA involved. Now, they're either written directly at Langley or somebody is a CIA agent pretending to be somebody else, and they happen to have access to a group of writers for maybe a larger show or something. But usually a lot of these scripts are written at
They're technical advisors. They're technical advisors.
Yeah, air quotes. Technical advisors. Is that like kinetic action? Is that like kinetic action, Susan? Is another, what do they call that?
Yeah. Well, it's like when they have like crime movies and they have the police provide technical assistance as to how the police would actually do something in a crime movie. So that's what they do the same with the spooks.
But it's horrible. It's like, at least they could, some of these scripts could be good. But I mean, it's like, who writes this stuff? Like, they find the hackiest person that works for them to write it. Because I mean, really? Seriously? And the worst part is the American public is so dumb. The general public, the people that are not awake, you know, the people that these elites, they actually call, they call them the dead. Okay? The people that are not awake and they don't look into any of this stuff. And,
they just accept everything, yeah.
They're like, the Osama bin Laden was a bad guy. You know that whole thing outside the White House, that whole, you know, party when they killed him on May 1st, that was all staged. Those were all college students that came down from Georgetown University.
Oh, seriously. Oh, my God.
And Bob,
wow.
That night we did a special broadcast, and we're watching the live footage, right? And I'm like, I said to Bob, how are they lighting off fireworks right on the other side of the fence on the White House? And he was like, good point. I'm like, dude, anti-war protesters get 20 feet within that fence, and the Secret Service uniformed is out there beating them. These guys are hanging tree limbs right over top of the fence. There's no Secret Service, and they're lighting off bottle rockets right next to the White House fence. And
that would be like, you know, they'd be under indictment in 5 minutes. The FBI would be, snipers would be swarming over them. You know, SWAT teams would be there.
Exactly. And I said, you don't think this is staged? I said, where the hell is the Secret Service? How do they know that this isn't a threat? Unless it's staged and they know there really isn't a threat. I guess that's why there are no cops there. You see, they always show their hand. They do stupid stuff because they're arrogant, and they do it so fast that they don't sit back and think about everything. They try to cover their basics.
But you see, most Americans won't even pick up on that. Most Americans are not going to be fooled, are going to be fooled by it. They're not sophisticated enough. We were talking about before the show, and I know you've done other stories about this, how the CIA and the military intelligence, Centralcom, have bought a software program that allows them to go onto the websites and take on 10 phony IDs with phony personalities, phony backgrounds, phony IP addresses. And so one person can have 10 secret identities and can go on the blogs and act as trolls and attack, try to pretend they have a multiple identity and a multiple presence. And it's like what you call the virtual army. And they are in this, they are going to fight us. And we have to be smart.
I agree.
We have to wake up.
I agree. We do have to wake up. Stay right there, Susan. Ladies and gentlemen, we're right back. Susan and I are back, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to get into the Patriot Act a little bit. Susan's got some very disturbing stories of, you know, firsthand experience, some of it about the Patriot Act, and it's really disturbing how fast your rights can get taken away. And then on top of it, if you think about that new bill that they're trying to push now, where if they label you a terrorist, that gives them the right to take away your citizenship, and if they take away your citizenship, there goes your constitutional protections.
Oh, God.
Right?
That is just so scary. I mean, and to say that somebody's not, if somebody tried to say I wasn't an American, I mean, that's just frightening. Because, I mean, you can love this country and hate the government. You know that, right? I mean, we all know that.
This country was founded on. Are you kidding me?
Absolutely. It's why, you know, yeah. And that's what they're trying to say, is that if you oppose the government, then that's what the Patriot Act says. The Patriot Act says that free speech is equal to sedition. And therefore, if you're a troublemaker, as demonstrated by speaking, free speech, criticizing the government, that qualifies as seditious behavior. It's a very short step to say that seditious behavior is a conspiracy to engage in terrorism. You don't actually have to have a bomb to be a terrorist. You know that, right? You can just advocate pulling down, you know, the Federal Reserve, and you're a terrorist. Seriously.
Well,
seriously,
exactly.
now.
That's what they, and see, it's harder for them to do that now. So every little step, like this bill that they want to pass, it's one more inch the closer. You know, and like my opening says, we have to fight for every inch, because if you give them an inch, they'll take a friggin' mile, these people. And they're evil. Yeah. They're evil. Look, they are evil. Look, I mean, they eat their own. They don't care. Look what they, again, example, not just you, but look what they did to you. You're a perfect example of, and then the other two guys that you didn't even know about until they locked the three of you up. You know, they sacrifice anybody, anything that goes against their status quo.
Their ideology. And it doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be truthful. Like, I was advocating nonviolence. I was a, quote, enemy non-combatant who opposed killing people and who advocated that nobody should be killed. And they said that made me an enemy non-combatant. I mean, and that my enemy non-combatant status meant that I should be locked in prison on a Texas military base. Now, this was Carswell Air Force Base, and you can imagine that these soldiers, this was in 2006, and these soldiers were fighting in Iraq, and they were losing. It was the worst year of the war. So here they're told that they have this Iraqi spy locked up in prison on their military base, and you cannot imagine the crazy things they tried to do to me. They refused to let me have attorney visits. I mean, I got to tell you, Bradley Manning, he's a kid, he's 23 years old. I empathize with him. I grieve for Bradley Manning. My situation was 1,000 times worse than that poor kid. Now, I think it's bad what they're doing. I am opposed to it. But what I suffered, they refused to let me have family visits. They refused to let me have attorney visits. Literally, my uncle, who was an attorney, came 3 times to the military base, and they had to have the U.S. Marshals literally standing behind him with a judge on the judge waiting in chambers for a phone call to execute a forced entrance to the military base. That's how bad it got. With the U.S. Marshals standing right next to him, he had to come into the base. Do you see what I'm saying? You don't even, I mean, when they did a warrantless search on me, I had 2 warrantless searches. And people, this is on the Patriot Act, and a lot of people have heard about warrantless searches, and it's like, well, what does that mean? That means, let's talk about this in detail, because you now are going to go through this. All of the listeners in this audience, especially with the Occupy Wall Street movement, you need to be afraid of this, or not afraid. You need to be aware of it, and you need to stand up for your rights. Don't be afraid. Don't you dare let them make you back down. Because if they know that they can make us back down from this, they're going to step it up even more. They've got to see that if they do it to us, we're not going to budge. So you cannot back down when they do it. But they're going to. And this is what it means. A warrantless search means the government can come into your house without any documentation. They can go through your things. They can go through your computer files. The first time they did it to me, I was at work. They don't have to leave any paperwork behind to say that they came into your house. They don't have to give you any notification at all that they were ever there. But they can now go through your possessions, go through your underwear drawer. If you're watching pornography, guys, and I know that some of you guys are watching pornography. My ex-boyfriend used to do it too. and he loved that stuff. They're going to be looking at every single video that you see, and they're going to keep a document of every single thing that you're looking at on the internet. They're going to go through all of your bank accounts, all of the money that you spend. What type of TV do you buy? What kind of book do you read? What kind of book do you read? What kind of music do you listen to? Are you a threat? Do you have a bad book in your bookshelf? That's the kind of society that we have now entered into. Now, the first time I had a warrantless search, my housemate, and this was really funny, she had a concealed weapons permit. And she was not the subject of the warrantless search, even though they came into our house. So imagine if she had come home before I did, and if she had found this guy, not knowing anything about my political background. Imagine if you stumble into your house and your housemate is getting a warrantless search, and they're going through everybody's underwear drawer, and you find this man in your house, and you're a woman, and you have a concealed weapons permit, which she did, which means she carried a gun with her in her purse at all times.
He would get triple tapped. That's what would have happened. He would have gotten 2 in the chest and 1 in the head, and then she would have found the ID on him and been like, "Oh crap!" See, and that's
she knew how to use a gun.
Well, see that
she knew how to use a gun.
We talked about that off air, where we've talked about that before. Where I said, there are certain parts of this country where if they do that, they better be careful, because there's certain people that, a lot of these government agents, they just take for granted. They think, well, they're the government, they can do whatever they want. They get this power built up in their head. I don't think they realize that there are certain people in this country that they wouldn't even think twice. They wouldn't, they're in Florida. You don't have to give somebody warning. If you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and someone's in your house, or you come home and you find someone's broken into your house, you don't even have to ask who they are. The law states you can shoot that person without even saying a word. You can just shoot them dead, because we have what's called the castle clause. It protects you. When you're in your castle, your home, you could do anything you have to protect it. You don't have to ask somebody. If you don't know who they are, they're in your house, you can assume that they're there to do you harm, and you can execute them with extreme prejudice.
And you can execute them with extreme prejudice. And listen, when you're a woman and you find a man in your house, and he's like, even if he told you he was a police officer, hey, don't worry about it, I'm a police officer. Oh, really? Then where's your warrant? Oh, I don't need a warrant. Oh, bloody F, yes, you do. You better not come into my house without a warrant and tell me you're a police officer, because I'm going to, because criminals do that. Criminals behave that way. And I have a right as a woman to protect myself from being raped or murdered. Period. End of discussion. And I'm telling you that the Patriot Act, when they have this warrantless search stuff, they are opening it up to even if you're a guy, you have a girlfriend who may not be subject to the search, and they're going through her underwear drawer, she's going to be mad. Somebody's going to die. Somebody's going to die.
Actually, something's going to happen. Something bad is going to happen, and someone's going to get hurt. And then they're just going to use it as more justification for more BS. All right, we're going to break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned, guys. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Susan and I were discussing off air. We were having a passionate discussion about, just what they're doing, because they're setting up both sides. They're setting up, and when I say they, I mean the social engineers, these elitist douches, the Illuminati, New World Order morons. All right, these guys are setting up both sides. Like Indiana is a perfect example. The state Supreme Court said that they can do warrantless searches now in houses. And right after that, a couple sheriff or a couple of them came out and said, yeah, we're going to start doing random house searches. Well, no. Constitution protects against that. I don't care if the state or city says, well, we're going to do it. No, okay, you're violating my constitutional rights. And what's going to happen is somebody's going to be armed, and they're not going to put up with that crap, and they're going to either be it's either going to be I don't care who you are, or it's going to be a case of, I don't know who you are, I don't trust that.
That's right.
And they're going to, then the person's going to try to force their way in, and they're going to end up shooting them, and then they're going to be like, oh.
For self-protection.
Of course.
Because listen, as a woman, I can tell you that my housemate, we almost had that situation in my home. Because my housemate, my beloved, she's a law-abiding, good American, sweet, nice, never breaks the law, no speeding tickets. She would tell you that if she saw a police officer on the street, she would think that her police officer is going to protect her. Okay, she's not going to shoot a police officer, but if you go into her home and if you break into her home, she has expectations, and she has reasonable expectations that the police are going to behave in a lawful manner. And there's no reason that any woman should expect a man to be in her house without her knowledge and permission. And saying that you're a police officer is just not good enough. It's not a good enough reason for you to be in somebody's house.
Well, listen to me. This is going to sound...
Period, no.
I'm sure somehow some douchebag is going to twist this the wrong way and say that I'm advocating,
killing police officers.
Yeah, like negative and violence towards cops, but I'm not. But I'm going to tell you what right now. How many times have you seen cases where cops on duty pick up somebody? This just happened. A cop picked up somebody. He pulled her over for speeding or whatever the hell it was, tail light out, pulled her out of the car, put her in the back of the squad car, drove her off to some remote location and raped the crap out of her. And then brought her back, to her and dumped her off by her car. Now, that happens. This isn't a one-time thing, maybe 30, 40 years ago it was, but this is not this, that only happens once in a while, Popeye. No.
Yeah.
This happens more and more because more sociopaths are being brought in to the police forces, and they're being indoctrinated through different methods into just being dehumanized towards the general public. And this is the kind of behavior that results from that. When you dehumanize anybody and you take away their humanity, and they stop looking at people like they're other humans, and they just start looking at them like they're cattle or like they're lower than them, this is the kind of crap that happens. So not everybody with a badge is reputable. So I don't care if you say you have a badge. I want to see a written warrant by a judge or an assigned warrant. And I want to see, there should be multiple, like a real search would entail multiple cops, a warrant, blah, 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 blah.
That's right. Not a single person going into your house.
Sneak
just because they feel like it.
And you know what?
That's what they're doing. Sneak and peek. It's very dangerous. Very dangerous. And the thing is, if you have a warrant, if you really have cause to go into somebody's house, then getting a warrant is not a big deal, because a judge is going to hear you give your explanation, and the judge is going to say, yeah, that's a reasonable reason, that's a reasonable justification to go in and get a warrant. And then you're going to give that piece of paper and show that you were there. And that's a simple matter, too, is saying you don't even think about this. Under the Patriot Act, the government has the right to come into your house, and they have no obligation to even say that they have come there. So you don't even know that they've been there. They could be waiting for you to leave again so that they can come back and finish whatever they were doing. I mean, they're sneaking around like criminals is what's happening. It's a very bad scene.
Yeah, and what they do is a lot of times they stage
taking away the integrity of the police.
They stage it to look like a break-in so that you think, oh, someone broke into my house, blah, 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 blah. Well, see, my wife, even if I'm not here, my wife is generally here. So if somebody tried coming in, she knows how to shoot. I've taught her.
Yeah.
I trained her how to shoot, and I told her to not have any mercy. If she has to unload the entire magazine, she has to unload the entire magazine. I told her I don't care. She knows when I come home. She knows when it's me. She knows.
But the thing is, and the thing is, we've now reached a point where we have to be concerned that police officers are going to do this to us, and the government is putting the police officers in a bad light as well. they're putting them into a bad position because they're encouraging them to do behavior that everybody knows is wrong. Everybody knows that you're not supposed to do
they're
this.
police officers. How do you know that guy dressed in plain clothes? Because obviously they're not going to break in their full, they're not going to break in full uniform. They're going to come in when they do these sneak and peek type things. They're going to be in like dressed all in black. How do you know that person's not there to do you harm?
Jeans and a t-shirt.
Yeah, I'm going to assume if you're in my house, I'm not. My first thought isn't going to be, well, maybe it's someone doing a sneak and peek. My first thought. And
what if some criminal? And what if it's reversed? What if some criminal gets caught inside your house and says, "Oh, I'm doing a warrantless search because the police, because I can, and I'm going to put you." Now, see, I see it as a woman. I see this strictly as a woman. And some man says, "Well, I'm going to put handcuffs on you while I'm searching your house so that you don't hurt me." And then he says, "Aha, surprise! I'm not really a police officer. I'm here to rape you." And now you're in handcuffs. And now you're disarmed, and now he's got your gun, and he's going to now use it against you and torture you and do all these terrible things to you, and he's used the Patriot Act because you know that's going to happen. You know that's going to happen.
Well, How do you know that? How do you know that the guy's not? Look, how many times have you seen people get brought down where they couldn't get brought down? Maybe the government was after them for one reason or another, or some agency was after them for some reason or another, and they maybe used to be a former asset or whatever, and the guy's been on the lam, and now with the psychotic training that he went through, whatever, now the guy's running around. This has happened as a serial killer. Or the guy goes off the rocker.
Oh my God, yes.
Serial rapists and stuff like that. So you don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to scare everybody, but you need to be. There's like a lot of times we focus on the government and this and that. And you forget that there is the average everyday sociopath psycho out there that you need to protect yourself from. Okay, so I guess the point that I know that Susan and I are getting at is the government's not using their head. And if they honestly, actually, I guess they are. They're thinking these social engineers are anyway, and they're using these people in the government as guinea pigs, as well as the police officers and even the citizens themselves. They're playing this game. It's both sides because they're setting it up so that eventually one day a citizen, for whatever reason they think the person is not a police officer or whatnot, and the guy is a cop, they're going to end up shooting somebody, and it's going to be in self-defense, but they're not going to portray it that way. Because the guy is going to be, an agent or whatever under the Homeland Security crap, and it's going to come out that because they said they've done the warrantless searches, it's already come out, so that's not a surprise. Mm-hmm. And then they'll prosecute this poor person, this individual, to the fullest extent of the law. And they'll, then they'll use it to try to justify, gun control. Because they always, remember, like Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So, and this is gonna be like a spark. You know how it is. They take advantage of any little thing, even if they didn't facilitate it. They'll take advantage of it and use it to their own agenda and to further their. And guys, I know the people who are listening are thinking to themselves, well, maybe this will happen sometime in the distant future. It's already happening. That's the point. And it's going to increase. The frequency of these things is going to be more intense, not less. And especially when we see the Occupy Wall Street crowd. Those are the types of people they're going to go after. And they're not bad people, and they're not criminal people, and they're not terrorists. But the Patriot Act, there's a huge misconception that the Patriot Act only exists to go after violent individuals or to take action to stop violence against the community. Yeah, under the Patriot Act,
but that is not true.
It considers dissent terrorism under the Patriot Act, and I'm not kidding. You guys can go look it up. It says dissent is terrorism. Even though Jefferson said dissent is the highest form of patriotism. We're going to break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You probably heard me and Susan talking coming out of the break there for a second. I was telling her a quick story about what happened to me on Friday night when I went to the haunted Deering Estate. And a lot. You know, you sit down with the people that work there or whatever, and they had some of the people obviously that work there, you know, work for the place there overnight to, you know, hang out and help facilitate. And the one lady that the spirits seem to be fond of is she's the vice president of the place that owns it. You know, she runs it. So long story short, she told us how to behave ourselves and everything. And if you don't antagonize them and if you're quiet, that's usually when things occur. And I was telling Susan, we did have things occur to us in certain parts of the place that we were. And we were in one of the most haunted parts of the whole property. And we hung out in there for about a good hour and a half, 2 hours. And we had some interesting experiences. I was telling Susan about one of them. The chair next to me, there was nobody sitting next to me. And the chair moved by itself and slammed into my leg and then went underneath the table. And the guy that was standing about 3 feet away nearly crapped his pants. He wasn't expecting it, and I thought the guy was going to have a heart attack. So it was kind of. I mean, that stuff doesn't bother me because I've experienced stuff like that before. So this, I was very like, you know, my blood pressure was very low key and very even. I was like, okay, it happens, whatever. And they're like, did that just happen? And I was like, yeah, it hit my leg. And everybody else, I was like the only calm person in the room. It was kind of funny. Everybody else was kind of.
See, I think stuff like that is really cool. I think I confess I have an interest in that kind of issue, those kind of issues. But I just have a wide ranging. I'm not afraid of things. I'm not afraid of ideas. I'm not afraid of experiences. Open-minded.
You have to be open-minded to be able to. If you're going to get into this realm of conspiracy and everything else, you have to eventually look at some sort of paranormal stuff because these elites practice certain levels of things. Like I did my Friday show was a special about Satanism, and my guest who came on, his name is Mark Passio. He really explained. He got in depth with it, and you have to understand that kind of stuff because that's the kind of things that these people do and partake in. I mean, look how giddy, you know, evil Hillary Clinton was when when she found out that Gaddafi was dead. She was all giggly and ooh beside herself.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'm sure if there was a small Iraqi child next to her, she would have eaten it.
Yeah. This is just craziness. Yeah, we are becoming Hillary Clinton is a goon. She's a scary. She's if David Icke is right about reptilian. I'm amazed that when I think that Hillary Clinton couldn't do anything worse. I mean, she's she's always been a feminist. I don't understand how she can rationalize supporting a government that is Al Qaeda that's going to impose Sharia on the people of Libya. But that's another story. I think that the Patriot Act is really important today to understand the Patriot Act. So let's focus on that. But
yeah, because this is our final segment. We got about 10.
Yeah. Let's focus on the Patriot Act and that because I just.
Well, you know, another example of the absurdity of the Patriot Act is what I was telling you, that 16-year-old kid. Now he's probably like 18 because he's been locked up for over a year now. I think it's been like a year and a half, almost 2 years, to be honest with you. But at the time, he was like 16, and he was making prank phone calls, and they locked him up as a terrorist under the Patriot Act. He has no access to his parents, no access to his lawyer.
Yeah.
For making prank phone calls. Now, even if the kid...
For making prank phone calls.
Exactly. And I haven't seen the evidence that he actually said, because they said he called in some fake bomb scares. And I understand that is a serious offense, okay? And he should be if he did do that...
Kids do stuff like that. I mean, they're kids. They're teenagers.
He should be punished, but accordingly. You know, when I was a teenager, we did stupid stuff like light fireworks off in school. Now you'd be a friggin' terrorist for that. But when I was a kid...
Oh, my God, you'd get 10 years.
Yeah, you'd probably get held under the freaking Patriot Act for it. But when I was a kid, flushing a cherry bomb down the toilet was a yearly event. I mean, that's every class did. There was some jerk off, and
everybody loved to do that. It was like we could hardly wait for it to happen.
Exactly.
I mean, seriously, it was like fun. It was like being a kid.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know, somebody said one of the commenters in the chat room brought up a good point about Hillary Clinton, anti-tyranny news. They said the speech she gave about respecting free speech as her goons beat up Ray McGovern for standing up in silent protest.
Yes.
A perfect example. Ray didn't do anything, you know, and he's standing there with his back turned to her, all quiet, and they, in come the muscly goons, and it always takes like 3 or 4 of them to take, someone out, because it's easier, it's easier to be a tough guy when you got 3 or 4 friends backing you up. It's not so easy to be a tough guy when it's one-on-one.
That's right. That's right. And a guy who's not speaking, who's got her back to Hillary Clinton. I mean, doesn't that say a lot? That she was threatened by a man who turned his back on her. Not who shouted at her. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten her. He didn't yell obscenities at her. He turned his back on her and stood against her with his back turned. And that offended her.
Well, old lizard lips wants you to look her in the face when she's, lying to the public.
Yeah. She's done a very poor job.
Iraqi and Afghan children. That's what she eats to sustain herself. She's evil. That woman is evil. If you can't look at her and see that she's not evil, you know what I mean? I'm not saying you, Susan. I know you know she's evil. But if the general public can't see how evil she is, which most people know she's just an evil, vile person. She's not a human. She's subhuman. She's some sort of...
She's arrogant. She's so far arrogant. She just presumes that she knows what's best for everyone. And this war in Libya shows how wrong she is. I mean, we've been talking for months about the Sharia and how I kept telling everybody, and you kept telling everybody, these people are Al-Qaeda fighters from Iraq, Afghanistan, Chechnya, the Balkans. They are returning to Libya from other conflicts. They are beheading people. They're sodomizing people. How many times did I listen to these idiots say in blogs, oh, no, they're not really sodomizing their opposition. Gaddafi was the norm. These are people who automatically do this to their enemies. Young men in Libya who have refused to join the rebel cause have been repeatedly sodomized.
Yep.
And so this time we got it on tape. And we've had other episodes that if you go to obamasLibya.com that Federal Jack is hosting, you'll see it, obamasLibya.com. You'll see that this is a pattern of behavior. There are other cases where they've castrated men who refuse to join the rebels. This time they did it to Gaddafi, and it was grotesque. But this is their behavior. This is their ordinary, daily behavior. And it's horrible. It's just, these are the people we supported. And we did it so they could institute Sharia and take away women's rights. And this is Hillary Clinton, who has bragged about her feminism for a whole lifetime. And then her greatest achievement as Secretary of State is to destabilize a perfectly prosperous, peaceful country and overturn all the advances in women's rights. And and I realize that a lot of you, maybe you don't like Gaddafi. That's okay. You don't have to like Gaddafi. But the question is, who are you going to replace Gaddafi with? And this was not a good move.
Oh, well, we replaced it with
terrible idea.
We replaced it with our little monster of radical Islam that we created. And now, and what Susan means about the Sharia thing is the fact that women had equal rights, not all equal rights, but more equal rights than anywhere else in that area.
In the Arab world.
In the Arab world,
Arab women, they under Gaddafi, they had the right to reject marriage proposals. Now, the Westerners, those of us in the West, were appalled by this. The idea that a woman would require protection so that she could say that when she was a 14-year-old girl, she did not want to get married to her father's or brother's choice of a husband.
That's gone.
She would have the right to say no.
That's gone.
We think, how could this even be a question? But in Sharia, she goes to jail in Kabul. If she's in Afghanistan and she rejects a marriage proposal, she goes to prison until she changes her mind. And this is prison while American soldiers stand by defending Karzai's government. I mean, this is just this craziness. And now we've done the same thing to Libya.
We're defending Karzai's government, and this is what kills me. The Taliban that we're fighting against over there, people are like, well, the Taliban did 9/11. No, they didn't. The Taliban was they were their own government. That was a separate thing.
The Taliban tried to warn us about 9/11. Do you realize that? The Taliban, let me repeat this. The Taliban gave us warnings about the 9/11 attack several months before it happened, by about June and July, because the Taliban was receiving financial help from the United States to destroy the opium poppy crops, and they wanted to continue to receive that money because they needed the income, because they were using it to buy guns, I'm sure. However, they did try to tell us about this thing. So the Taliban was not the threat. You're talking about Al-Qaeda was the threat. And even Al-Qaeda wasn't really the threat because we're the ones who did it.
Well, now they even admit that there's only there's less than 100 of them running around Afghanistan right now. So I guess, that justifies over 100,000 troops.
Well, you know why there are only 100 Al-Qaeda soldiers in Afghanistan? Because a lot of them have gone to Libya.
Of course.
Libya is now, I want everybody to know this, Libya is loaded with Afghani fighters
Susan,
who have been brought over with the Libyan rebels. Sorry, I love coming on your show.
That's okay. We're going to get cut off because we're out of time. But thank you for coming on. And everybody, go get Susan's book, Extreme Prejudice.
And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Yes, they are, ladies and gentlemen. Freedom, fairness, and justice are more than ideas. They're perspectives, and I suggest everyone start to live by them. Welcome to the Sunday edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It's October 30th, 2011, one day before All Hallows Eve. And I'd like to welcome to the show my good friend Susan Lindauer, who, as you guys know, comes on about once or twice a month, and she gives me updates on Libya. She's told you guys about Iraq. She's told you guys about many things, but I like to get Susan's input as things move forward, because Libya and even Iraq still to this day are very fluid situations. And I'm currently reading Susan's book, Extreme Prejudice, and it reads like a spy novel. I'm about a third of the way through, and it's, when they came to, I felt anxious for you when I was reading it, and you described how they came to your door, the FBI came and got you, as a quote-unquote Iraqi agent and all this. So I suggest you guys read Susan's book, because it's like reading a spy novel, but it's, real. And you'll...
Yeah, people think it's going to be an academic book. It's not academic at all. It's not a scholarly tome like this boring, yicky stuff. I don't live like that. I don't write like that.
Well, that's what makes the book interesting, and it helps flow, Susan. Part of the people get to understand you as a human being more than just what the lamestream media and Wikipedia, which I would not use as a source. I've had skeptics try to tell me on many different occasions about different things. Well, it says in Wikipedia, right? And I could sign into Wikipedia and change things. So that doesn't, that's not really a good source. Anybody could go in there and put whatever they want.
Absolutely. One time in 1 year, Wikipedia gave me 3 different birthdays. And I was like, and literally to correct it, I had to have my attorney contact Wikipedia, and they demanded to see my birth certificate. And
that's why people love you, Susan. All right, stay right there. We're going to break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a few minutes. Stay tuned. More with my friend, Susan Lindauer. We'll be right back.
Tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
People are always asking me, yo, Gemini, what's your angle? Are you a devil or an angel? And I say both, as I continue to blame the Knights Templar and the Hospitallers, the real reason New York lost their tower.
Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And to answer, before I get back into everything with Susan, to answer the question in the chat room, or not really a question, somebody made more of a statement about how when they try to get on, when I put articles out on Twitter, that happened, and they said it was blocked, they couldn't get to it, said server not found. That happens a lot with my website. most noticeably with the page that I made with the help of Miss Susan Lindauer about the NATO war crimes going on in Libya. And whenever I tweet it or put it on Facebook, I always get at least one message on both that they can't get to it, and my website's down. And I say, no, the website's not down. You're being blocked. One guy even sent me a message, and he said, I know that you're being blocked because it kept telling me that the server was down, so I went through a proxy server, and I was able to get through to you. So that means they, for anybody that knows anything about hacking, he was able to get around whatever filter they had up, but that page gets blocked in a lot of countries. So that went viral. It's literally on over 2,000 different sites of the link.
Yay!
All over
We're beating them. We're beating them.
Been translated into Russian. I've seen it in Chinese. It's incredible. It's being translated into other languages, and the pictures and videos that we have up, the link to the site that we made specifically for Obama's Libya.com, it's gone viral. And the truth is out there. And I've told people, rip copies of the video. Go get Real Player. Go to that page. You can rip a copy of every video so you have it. So if they eventually try to take it down or it's blocked, you can upload it. See, the whole point is to flood the internet with it, because once it's like everybody knows, once it's on the internet, it's on the
finally fix it. They were like, if you can't give us a birth certificate, then, and we're like, whoa, wait a minute. We are, this is the attorney for Susan Lindauer, and you got all these other people who are making up stories about her. She's the real thing. And they're like, well, how do we know you're telling the truth? They're like, oh my God, we had to send a birth certificate. I'm not making that up. Crazy.
Well, see, there you go, because people can go in and they switch things around and they change it. And I find it very, I'm using air quotes, coincidental, because I don't believe in coincidence, that people like you, Judith Vary Baker, who was Lee Harvey Oswald's mistress, and she was working on a weaponized form of cancer in the 60s to take out Castro. Anybody, even William Cooper, Jim Mars, stuff like that, David Icke, you start to look these people up in Wikipedia, and a lot of you all have negative stuff in there. It's always, they're a nutbag, or they're crazy, or, this or that. It's always the same negative tone. But that's just coincidence, right? I'm just supposed to believe that's all coincidental.
Yes, it's like somebody sent me a blog, Digital Journal sent me my Wikipedia file, and they said, we want you to explain this before you publish on on our blog. And I referred them to an affidavit by my attorney saying that my story was correct, and they had 28,000 wiretaps and 8,000 emails and, blah, 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 all this documentation to prove my story was true. But it literally took an attorney affidavit before they would let me publish on their blog, because they're so, the defamation is so over the top. But I take it as a compliment, and I'll tell you something. For all of you out there who are so vicious towards me on Wikipedia, if there's anybody listening, I intend, my attorney and I had a good chuckle about this, and we agree. We're leaving Wikipedia as it is because it stands as evidence of the viciousness and the malice of the deceptions by the GOP in the war on terrorism. And Wikipedia proves my story when I say that the GOP exerted extreme violence and brutality towards the system of democracy in this country. And all I have to do is say, look up Wikipedia, and you'll see it. Because people are now trying to say that I was never really held in prison on a Texas military base. I was never really indicted on the Patriot Act. That's just disinformation. So as people realize that I'm not the crazy woman that they've tried to say, that I'm not this religious maniac. Everybody tried to say I was a religious maniac. They actually did that.
Well,
and now they can't pull that anymore.
And so
now they're trying to say,
they use the psychic thing against you too, because you admitted that you have the ability to I
have an interest in psychic phenomena.
Yes.
Yeah, sure I do.
So, But you know
Okay.
what? Does that make you a nut? You know, I don't think so. Look, I went to a real haunted estate on this past Friday and hung out until about 5 o'clock in the morning. We were supposed to. We were originally going to leave at 4, and we ended up hanging out till probably actually about 5:30, and then we left. And we hung out.
Where was it?
Down in South Florida. It's called the Deering Estate. It's the most haunted place in South Florida, and it really is haunted. It dates back to, there were people that, Indians that date back to 10,000 years ago that lived on the land. So a lot of it, there's an Indian burial ground on the land and everything else. So yeah, it really is haunted. I saw some interesting stuff, but the point is, does that make me crazy? Because I went and checked that out, you know what I mean? So just because you have, the interest
I am a
in
progressive thinker. I am open-minded to all kinds of ideas.
But so because you're
That's how I am. That's what makes me who I am.
Because you're open-minded, I guess that's what makes you the bad person, you know, the quote unquote enemy, because you think outside the box, which makes you actually
definitely
dangerous. It makes you a dangerous enemy to them. You might not think you're dangerous to them, but you are, because you present, and you could give facts and information to other people, and the way you come across is very important. You don't come across like some scholarly douchebag. You're very personable. You know, you have this.
Thank you.
This very. You're very charming, and you're giddy. You're fun. You know what I mean. You can have a conversation with you, and it flows. So people that listen to you are more apt to believe what you have to say, because you're not coming across like some idiot, and you don't talk down to people. You know, it's like you talk to people, and that makes you dangerous.
Thank you.
That makes you dangerous.
I take that as a compliment.
You should take it as a compliment. I would consider it a Medal of Honor, because that means that you're doing something. So, I mean, obviously you're...
Well, you know what? It's true. Well, the thing is, when I give talks and stuff, I speak from my heart, and I just tell the truth, because I lived it, so I know what it is.
Well...
Either we heal as a team, or we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen, believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell, 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now I can't make you do it. You gotta look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now I think you're gonna see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're gonna see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're gonna do the same for him. That's a team.